Marcus Vale stood on the deck of the starship, resolute, watching the last sunset he would ever witness as a Navy officer, the red and orange hues stretching across the sky like the dying embers of a long war, his heart heavy with the weight of the years spent serving his country, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the scar along his jawline, a reminder of the battles fought, and the comrades lost. The soft hum of the engines was a familiar comfort. But tonight it felt different. This was the end of a chapter, and despite the peace that should come with retirement, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He had given everything to the Navy, his youth, his energy, his purpose, and now as he prepared to step into civilian life, he found himself wondering if he was ready for it, ready to live without a cause to fight for, without orders to follow, without the adrenaline of battle pulsing through his veins. He felt the ground beneath his boots shift slightly as the ship made its final descent toward Earth. After years of being away, it should have felt like home, but it felt distant, almost foreign, like he was stepping into someone else's life, someone else's future. He had lived for the mission so long that now he wasn't sure who he was without it. He wasn't sure how to exist outside the uniform, outside the role he had built for himself. A voice crackled over the comms, breaking his thoughts. "Captain Vale, we're approaching the docking bay. Prepare for disembarkation." It was Lieutenant Harris, a young officer with a crisp tone and an eager attitude. Marcus had always admired her professionalism, but right now it sounded too sharp, too impersonal, almost as if the ship itself was reminding him that he no longer belonged here. He had no place left on this vessel, no orders to give, no mission to command. He gave a brief nod to the comm screen. Even though she couldn't see it, his gaze still fixed on the horizon, where the fading light met the endless expanse of space beyond Earth's atmosphere. Soon he'd be walking the streets of the planet he'd once defended with everything he had, but the idea of returning to the normal life he had left behind seemed more daunting than stepping onto the battlefield. As the ship landed softly and the engines powered down, Marcus felt the weight of it all crashing down on him. The finality of his service, the uncertainty of what came next. But just as he turned to leave his quarters, something strange happened. His comm device buzzed to life. An encrypted message appeared from an untraceable source. It was brief, just a few lines of text, but they sent a chill down his spine. "Marcus, I hope you haven't forgotten our last conversation. I'm not done with you yet, not by a long shot." He stared at the words, his mind racing as he considered who would still be reaching out to him. After all this time, he hadn't even been home an hour yet, and already something had found him again. And for the first time since stepping off the Resolute, Marcus felt the stirrings of the old fire, the one that had driven him through every mission, every battle, every moment of his military career. The call of the unknown was far too familiar, and something told him that his new beginning might be more dangerous than he could have ever expected. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the message was a warning or an invitation. Either way, it pulled him back in, like a magnet drawing him to an unknown force. He stared at the encrypted transmission for a long moment before making up his mind. He had nothing left on Earth to keep him here. The life he knew was gone, and if the past had taught him anything, it was that a life without purpose was a life barely worth living. He tapped the comm device, initiating a secure reply. The message was short, to the point. "I'm in. Tell me what's next." A part of him wanted to add a question about who was behind this, or what exactly was going on, but he resisted. The thrill of the unknown, the danger, the adventure. It was exactly what he had been missing. And if it cost him everything to find it again, he was ready to pay the price. Within minutes, the reply came. "Meet me at the old docks, south side. Midnight." The brief message ended there, with no further explanation. It didn't matter. Marcus knew the drill. He had lived his life in secrecy, moving through shadows, pulling strings, and following whispers. The world was full of those who worked in the gray spaces between the official channels. People who knew how to pull a veteran from retirement and into something far bigger than what they had left behind. That night, the sky above the old docks was clouded, the light from nearby buildings casting long shadows across the empty piers. The air smelled of salt and metal, familiar and comforting. Marcus slipped into the alleyway leading to the meeting point, his boots making no sound on the wet pavement. As he neared the designated spot, a silhouette emerged from the darkness, tall and imposing, wearing the same standard-issue flight suit Marcus had once worn, only more worn in, more lived in. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face he thought he'd never see again. "Didn't think you'd still be around," Marcus said, his voice low, surprised, and more than a little wary. The figure smirked. "You know how it is, Marcus. Some of us don't retire when the time comes. Some of us just adapt." It was Captain Elara Hayes, a former Navy officer who had disappeared without a trace years ago, rumored to be dead after a botched mission on a forgotten world. Her appearance here was as much of a shock as the offer she brought with her. "What's this about, Elara?" Marcus asked, still trying to process the shock of seeing her alive. She gave him a sharp look, eyes full of secrets. "You're about to be part of something bigger than anything you've ever done. Bigger than anything we did in the Navy. There's a reason they've been keeping the good stuff hidden from the public for all these years, Marcus. And it's time you learned why." Marcus was silent for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He had known there were things hidden in the deepest corners of the galaxy, things the government was too afraid to reveal. But now, with Elara standing before him, offering a chance to find the truth, to dig deeper into the unknown than ever before, he felt a fire rekindling within him, a purpose he had long since thought lost. "What's the catch?" he asked, his voice steady, even as his heart began to race with the anticipation of what lay ahead. Elara smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind that only someone who had been to the edge and back could give. "Catch. There's always a catch, Marcus, but you'll want to hear this one. You're not just going on another mission. You're going to unravel a conspiracy that's been buried in the stars for centuries, and you're going to do it with a crew of people who have no idea what they're about to get into." The words hung in the air, electric and charged with possibilities. Marcus didn't need to hear any more. This was exactly what he had been waiting for. It was time to move again, to leave the past behind, and to embark on the kind of adventure that made every sacrifice, every battle, and every loss worth it. He nodded. "I'm in. Let's do it." Elara's smile widened, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "I knew you'd say that. Welcome to the Nomad Star, Marcus. Hope you're ready for what's coming." As they walked into the shadows, toward the unknown, Marcus felt the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was it, the beginning of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. And for the first time in years, he felt alive again. The Nomad Star was unlike any ship Marcus had ever seen. It wasn't a military vessel, with its sleek and elegant design, built for speed and agility rather than brute force. It had an air of mystery about it, the kind of ship that didn't fit neatly into any category. The hull gleamed in the light of distant stars as it docked in the cavernous hangar, and Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as he stepped aboard. There was something powerful about it, something alive in its very structure. Elara led him through the winding corridors, her steps sure and confident. The crew was already assembling in the briefing room, a mix of military veterans, scientists, and adventurers, each with a different background and purpose. The hum of the ship's engines seemed to vibrate through the walls, a constant reminder that they were far from the safe, familiar territory of Earth. The future stretched before them, dangerous, unknown, and brimming with possibilities. As they entered the briefing room, the crew fell silent. They had all heard of Marcus's reputation, his time in the Navy, and his reputation as a strategist. But this was different. This mission would require more than just tactical skill. It would demand the kind of ingenuity that only someone who had lived in the shadows, who had seen the darkest corners of the universe, could bring to the table. The captain of the Nomad Star stood at the head of the room, a tall, imposing figure with short-cropped black hair and piercing blue eyes. His uniform was civilian, a blend of practical gear with the faded insignia of a deep space exploration company that didn't officially exist. His name was Captain Silas Kane, and when he spoke, his voice commanded attention. "Welcome aboard," he said, his gaze sweeping across the crew, settling briefly on Marcus. "This mission will take us farther than any human has ever gone. We're not just charting new worlds, we're searching for something that's been hidden in the darkness of space for millennia. Something that could change the course of history." The tension in the room was palpable as Kane paused, allowing his words to sink in. Marcus could sense the anticipation, the mixture of fear and excitement. It was the same feeling he had experienced countless times before, when standing on the precipice of the unknown, unsure of what they would find but knowing that whatever it was would alter everything. "We've received intel," Kane continued, his voice steady, "about an ancient alien civilization, one that predates even the oldest records of human history. They left behind relics, artifacts of unimaginable power, and we're going to find them." Marcus could feel the weight of the captain's words pressing down on him. This wasn't just a treasure hunt. This was a mission that could either catapult humanity into a new age or plunge it into war. The idea of alien technology, long thought to be the stuff of legend, was enough to make anyone's blood run cold. But Marcus didn't hesitate. This was what he was trained for, navigating the unknown, making sense of the chaos, and ensuring survival. "We'll start with the planet Cora V," Kane said, his tone lowering. "An uncharted world at the edge of known space. All we know about it is that it holds the key to what we're looking for. The artifact we need is buried deep beneath its surface." A series of images flashed up on the screen behind him, showing a barren, rocky landscape dotted with strange formations. The planet's surface looked inhospitable, the kind of place where life had no business surviving. Yet Marcus knew better than to trust appearances. This was where the game would begin. The crew's murmurs faded as Kane turned to Marcus, locking eyes. "We'll need your expertise, Vale. We're not just looking for treasure. We're looking for a way to survive whatever's waiting for us on Cora V." Marcus felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. It wasn't just about the mission anymore. It wasn't just about uncovering ancient secrets. It was about the crew, the lives that would be in his hands, and the ever-present threat of something far older and more dangerous than humanity had ever encountered. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady, eyes burning with the fire of a soldier reborn. As the briefing continued, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were all walking into a trap, one set centuries ago by a civilization that had long since vanished, and he would have to outthink it all, or risk losing everything. But for now, all that mattered was the journey ahead. And in that moment, as the Nomad star powered up and began its journey toward Cora V, Marcus knew he was exactly where he needed to be. The journey to Cora V was slow but steady, the Nomad star cutting through the stars like a ghost in the vast emptiness of space. For days they traveled in silence, the crew adjusting to the long stretches of isolation, the hum of the engines their only companion. Marcus spent his time running simulations, analyzing the scant data they had on Cora V. The planet was a mystery, unscanned by any ship, uncharted by any explorer. It was as if it had been deliberately erased from the records, hidden from the galaxy for reasons unknown. The more Marcus studied, the more questions piled up, and the more uneasy he felt about their mission. Something didn't feel right, but he couldn't put his finger on it. On the third day out, as the crew gathered in the mess hall for a late dinner, the atmosphere shifted. Ilara, who had been unusually quiet since their departure, looked over at Marcus, her eyes intense. "You know we're not just searching for an artifact, right?" she asked, her voice low enough that only he could hear. Marcus raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" "There's more to this than Kane's telling us," she said, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "We've been following his lead, but he's hiding something. There's something dangerous on Cora V, and I'm not sure if even Kane knows what it is." Marcus felt a twinge of concern, but he kept his voice steady. "What are you suggesting?" Ilara's eyes darkened, a flicker of something dangerous in them. I'm suggesting that we're not just dealing with ancient technology. I think there's something still alive on that planet, something that could be far worse than anything we faced. And if Kane knows about it, he's not telling us." Marcus didn't respond immediately. The idea that their mission might not be what they thought was unsettling, but he had learned long ago to trust his instincts. He knew something was off, but at this point, there was no turning back. They were already committed. "We'll deal with it when we get there," he said finally, though his voice lacked the certainty he had hoped to convey. The conversation ended there, but the unease remained, gnawing at Marcus as they continued their journey. Days later, the Nomad star arrived in orbit around Cora V. From space, the planet appeared like a dead world, barren and lifeless, its surface pocked with deep craters and jagged mountains. It was a hostile environment, one that seemed incapable of supporting life. But Marcus knew better than to trust appearances. He had seen countless worlds that appeared inhospitable, only to reveal hidden dangers beneath the surface. As the crew prepared to land, Marcus stood by the observation window, staring at the planet below. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it, the unknown. Whatever lay beneath the surface of Cora V was the reason they had come all this way, and Marcus wasn't sure whether they were about to uncover something incredible or unleash a nightmare. The landing was uneventful, the Nomad star touching down on a rocky plain near a series of cliffs. The air was thin and the temperature was freezing, but nothing unexpected. Marcus suited up in his exosuit, checking the systems one last time. He was the first one out the door, the crew following behind, each of them armed and ready for whatever they might encounter. The landscape was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of their boots on the rocky ground. The sky was a dull gray, the sun hidden behind thick clouds. As they moved toward a nearby canyon, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His every sense was heightened, every shadow an enemy, every gust of wind a potential threat. But there was nothing, just the barren world stretching endlessly before them. As they reached the entrance to the canyon, the team halted. In the distance, barely visible, was something that didn't belong. A faint shimmer in the air, almost like a mirage, flickered just beyond their sight. It wasn't natural. Did anyone else see that? Ilara's voice crackled over the comms. Marcus nodded grimly. "Yeah. Stay alert. We're not alone." The moment the words left his mouth, a strange rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. The silence of the planet was shattered as something massive moved deep within the canyon. Whatever was hidden on Cora V, they were about to uncover it. And Marcus had the sinking feeling it wouldn't be something they could walk away from. The ground trembled again, this time harder, more persistent. The team braced themselves, weapons drawn, eyes scanning every shadow, every crack in the canyon walls. The rumble seemed to come from deep below, as if something ancient and enormous was stirring beneath the planet's surface. The air grew thick with tension, and Marcus could feel a weight settling in his chest. This was no ordinary mission. Whatever they had come to find on Cora V was waking up, and it was far from welcoming. "Keep moving," Marcus ordered, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We need to find the source of that sound. If this is a trap, we need to be ready." Ilara led the way, her eyes sharp and alert, her movements precise. The rest of the crew followed closely behind, their breath visible in the cold air. The canyon stretched ahead, winding through jagged rocks that seemed to rise like the bones of some long-dead beast. The path was narrow, with walls on either side that closed in as they went deeper. It was a labyrinth of natural stone, but Marcus knew there was something more hidden here, a secret that had been buried for centuries. The rumbling intensified, and suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked, sending a shockwave through the air. A massive slab of rock split open in front of them, revealing a dark tunnel leading downward, deep into the heart of the planet. "Do we go in?" One of the crew members, a young engineer named Kira, asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before answering. "We have no choice. This is what we came for." The team descended into the tunnel, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The walls were smooth, as if carved by intelligent hands, and there were strange markings etched into the stone, symbols that neither Marcus nor anyone else could decipher. It was clear that they had found something far older than anything they had imagined. This wasn't just an artifact they were after. They were on the brink of uncovering an entire lost civilization, one that had left behind a legacy of power and danger. As they moved deeper into the tunnel, the air grew warmer, the temperature rising steadily as they descended. There was an oppressive hum in the air, a low vibration that seemed to pulse through their bones. The walls began to change, shifting from smooth stone to something far more alien, an unnatural metallic surface that gleamed faintly in their lights. "Hold up," Marcus said, raising a hand. He stopped in front of a large doorway, a massive archway made of the same strange material. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Too perfect, too precise. It looked as if it had been built to withstand the ravages of time, designed to last forever. "Is this it?" Ilara whispered, her voice barely audible in the silence. Marcus stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on the surface of the arch. As he touched it, the hum grew louder, the walls vibrating more intensely. He pulled back quickly, eyes narrowing. The door seemed to respond to his touch, a faint glow emanating from the edges. "Something's happening," Marcus said, his voice low with a mix of awe and caution. "This isn't just a door, it's a trigger." Before anyone could react, the glow intensified, and the door slowly began to open, revealing what lay beyond. A massive chamber stretched out before them, its ceiling so high it disappeared into the darkness above. The air inside was thick with a strange, electric charge, and at the center of the room, bathed in an eerie blue light, sat the artifact. It was enormous, far bigger than anything Marcus had imagined. The artifact wasn't just a piece of technology, it was a structure in itself, a fusion of metal and crystalline energy, its surface alive with shifting patterns of light. It hummed with power, a force so potent that it seemed to draw everything in the room toward it. "We found it," Ilara breathed, her voice tinged with awe and something darker, a hint of greed in her tone. Marcus stepped forward cautiously, but as he did, something else caught his attention, a figure emerging from the shadows at the far end of the chamber. A figure cloaked in darkness, its form indistinct, its presence unmistakable. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice echoed, low and chilling, as it reverberated through the chamber. Marcus froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. The figure stepped forward into the light, revealing a face that was both familiar and completely alien. The figure was human, but its eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light, and there was something profoundly wrong about its presence. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, his voice low and steady. The figure tilted its head, a smile twisting at the corners of its mouth. "I am the guardian of this place. And you are trespassers." The room seemed to pulse with energy as the figure's words hung in the air, thick with a threat that Marcus couldn't yet fully comprehend, but he knew one thing for certain. The danger had only just begun. The figure before them wasn't human, not entirely, anyway. Its features were elongated, its eyes unnaturally bright, almost glowing in the dim light of the chamber. There was a coldness about it, something that felt like it had existed far longer than any living being should. The creature's voice was smooth and clipped, each word deliberate, like it had spoken the same line 1,000 times. "You have no idea what you've disturbed," it said, stepping closer, its movements fluid, unnervingly graceful. "This place was sealed for a reason. You should never have come." Marcus took a step forward, his mind racing. The hum of the artifact was louder now, almost drowning out the creature's voice. The energy radiating from the object in the center of the room felt oppressive, like the very air was thick with it. But Marcus wasn't about to back down, not now. not when they were so close to uncovering the truth. "We didn't come here to disturb anything," he said, keeping his voice firm. "We're here to find answers. You're guarding something that's been hidden for a reason. Tell us what it is." The figure let out a soft laugh, almost a sneer. "You think you're ready to understand what's hidden here? No, soldier. You're playing with forces far beyond your comprehension. The artifact is not just a tool. It is a prison, a key to something ancient and far more dangerous than you could ever fathom." Marcus felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The creature's words were unsettling, and the more he listened, the more the weight of the situation pressed down on him. If this artifact was some kind of prison, what had been contained? What was waiting to be unleashed? Before he could ask another question, the figure raised a hand, and the room seemed to shift. The walls groaned, the temperature rising rapidly, the air thick with static. A low, guttural sound echoed through the chamber, as if something beneath the surface of the planet was stirring. The artifact's hum grew louder, now accompanied by a deep, resonating vibration that seemed to shake the very foundation of the planet. "Do you hear that?" Ilara asked, her voice tight with fear. "What is that noise?" The figure's eyes narrowed, the light in them flickering. "It's too late," it said, its voice now carrying a note of urgency. "You've activated the power source. The prison is beginning to break." A sudden explosion of energy erupted from the artifact, a blinding flash of light that momentarily blinded them all. Marcus shielded his eyes, trying to focus, but the room seemed to warp around him, the ground shaking violently. The air was electric, and he could feel the pulse of energy emanating from the artifact, reverberating through his bones. When the light finally dimmed, the chamber was no longer the same. The walls had cracked open, revealing massive, twisted structures, alien technology that seemed to pulse with an ancient energy. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the very atmosphere had changed. And in the center of the room, the artifact was no longer still. It was alive, its energy thrumming like a heartbeat. Marcus took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to get out. "What have we done?" he whispered, realizing the gravity of their actions. The creature before them watched with an almost satisfied expression, though its eyes now flickered with something darker. "You've freed it," it said, its voice a mix of pity and mourning. "The one who was bound, the one who was never meant to escape." A deep rumble echoed from beneath the planet's surface, and the chamber trembled again, harder this time. Marcus could feel it. Something was awakening, something that had been dormant for centuries. He looked around at the crew, seeing the fear in their eyes. The terror was palpable. They had unwittingly unleashed something that might never be contained again. Ilara moved closer to Marcus, her face grim. "We need to get out of here. Now." But before they could react, the figure raised both hands, and a powerful energy field shot out from the artifact, surrounding them all. The force was overwhelming, pinning them in place, and Marcus's muscles locked up, as if the energy was drawing the very will from his body. "You cannot leave," the figure said, its voice now filled with authority. "Not until you understand what you have unleashed. Not until you see the consequences of your actions." A sudden crash sounded from above, and a massive shadow loomed at the far end of the chamber. Something was coming, something monstrous, and it was moving quickly. Marcus's mind raced. They had to get out, but the energy field was too strong, and the creature, whatever it was blocking their exit. The ground beneath their feet began to shift, opening up into a deep chasm. From the depths, something enormous began to rise. Its shape indistinct at first, but growing clearer by the second. A massive hulking form, covered in scales that shimmered like obsidian, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Whatever had been freed was now awake. And it was coming for them. The creature emerged from the depths of the chasm with terrifying speed, its colossal form stretching high into the air. It was an abomination, a nightmare made flesh, its body a twisted amalgamation of ancient technology and organic matter. its scales gleaming darkly like blackened glass. Each movement it made caused the ground to quake beneath their feet, sending tremors through the chamber that rattled their bones. Its eyes burned with a cold, malevolent light, and a low growl reverberated from deep within its throat, like the sound of a distant storm. Marcus barely had time to process what he was seeing before the energy field around them intensified, pushing them back toward the artifact. The creature's presence alone seemed to warp the space around them, and every breath felt like it was suffocating them. The figure that had been guarding the artifact stood still, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at its lips. "You've awakened him," the guardian said, its voice now rich with satisfaction. "The one who was never meant to walk this galaxy again. The Adeptor, a being of unimaginable power, once bound here, but now free. Why didn't you warn us?" Ilara shouted, her voice breaking through the chaos. "Why didn't you stop us from activating the artifact?" The figure merely shrugged, the smile never fading. "It was never meant to be stopped. This is his fate, and yours." Marcus gritted his teeth, every instinct screaming at him to find a way out. He had seen death, had faced monsters and horrors before, but this was different. This was no ordinary fight. They weren't dealing with mere survival now. They were fighting for the future of the entire galaxy. The Adeptor took a step forward, its immense claws scraping against the stone floor with a sound like grinding metal. Each step it took left deep impressions in the earth, cracks spiderwebbing out from the points where its feet touched the ground. It was coming closer, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Not yet. "Move, now," Marcus barked, snapping the crew out of their shock. His training kicked in. They couldn't fight this creature. Not yet. They needed to regroup, to find a way to survive long enough to figure out what they were dealing with. "Retreat to the tunnel," Marcus commanded. "Fall back." The crew scrambled, scrambling to their feet, moving as quickly as they could through the shifting terrain. But as they turned to make their way back toward the entrance, the energy field surrounding them flickered again, and a violent pulse of energy shot out from the Adeptor, sending a shockwave through the chamber. The ground cracked beneath their feet, and the entire room seemed to shift as if it were alive, responding to the presence of the monster. Marcus lost his balance, stumbling to the ground, but he quickly regained his footing and pulled Ilara up with him. They had to move faster. There was no time to waste. Behind them, the Adeptor roared, a sound that made the walls of the chamber shake, as if the very structure of the planet was groaning in agony. The creature advanced, its massive body lurching forward, each step causing the air to vibrate. It was fast, faster than anything of its size had any right to be, and it was closing in on them. "Captain," Kara cried out, her voice trained with panic. "We can't outrun it." Marcus's mind raced. They needed a plan, and fast. The entrance to the tunnel was just ahead, but they wouldn't make it if the creature kept advancing at this rate. He needed to buy them time. He needed to distract it. But how? The answer came to him in a flash. The artifact. They had no idea what kind of power it held, but if it was what had been keeping the Adeptor bound for all these centuries, perhaps it could also be used to stop it, or at least slow it down. "Ilara," Marcus called out, his voice urgent. "We need to get to the artifact. It's the only way we're going to survive this." She hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the monstrous creature closing in on them. "Are you insane? You want to use it?" "We don't have a choice," Marcus snapped. "We either try or we die." With no other option, Ilara nodded, and together they sprinted toward the artifact, the rest of the crew following behind. The Adeptor roared once more, the sound deafening, but Marcus pushed it from his mind. They had a chance, maybe not a good one, but it was the only chance they had. As they reached the artifact, the ground shook violently beneath them, and the air around the object seemed to warp and twist. The glowing energy pulsed in time with their heartbeats, a strange connection beginning to form as they approached. Marcus reached out, his hand hovering just above the surface of the artifact, feeling the power emanating from it. Then, without warning, a blinding flash of light erupted from the artifact, sending shockwaves through the chamber. The Adeptor froze, its massive form shuddering, as if caught in the grip of some unseen force. The chamber was silent for a brief moment, an eternity in the midst of chaos. Then, a voice, ancient and powerful, filled the air. "Who dares awaken me?" The voice was like thunder, shaking them to their core. And Marcus knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone. This was only the beginning. The voice echoed through the chamber, a booming force that seemed to resonate within their very bones. It was not just a sound. It was a presence, an ancient power that had been dormant for centuries, waiting to be released. The Adeptor towered over them, its eyes glowing with an unearthly light as it regarded the crew with a mix of curiosity and wrath. "Who dares awaken me?" The voice thundered again, and the ground beneath their feet trembled in response. The air was thick with energy, crackling like a storm ready to break. Marcus stood frozen, his hand still hovering above the artifact. He could feel the pulse of its power surging through him, a connection that felt both alien and familiar. The artifact seemed alive now, its surface rippling with light, as if it were responding to the presence of the Adeptor. The creature's massive form shifted, but it did not move closer. It was as if it was waiting for something, waiting for an answer. Marcus's mind raced. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. The Adeptor was no mere monster. It was something far older, something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. He needed to act fast. They needed to understand how to control this power, how to use the artifact before it was too late. "It's responding to us," Ilara whispered, her voice low with awe and fear. "The artifact, it's alive." Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the Adeptor. "It's more than just a key. It's a weapon. Or a prison." The Adeptor let out a low guttural growl, its glowing eyes narrowing as it took a step forward. "You are not worthy of such power," it hissed, its voice filled with disdain. "You are but ants, playing with fire." The air grew colder, and the energy field around the artifact began to pulse with a rhythmic intensity. Marcus could feel it now, the pull of the artifact, a force that was almost hypnotic. It wanted something from him, something that he wasn't sure he was ready to give. But if he didn't act, if they didn't harness it, they would all be destroyed. "Do it," Ilara said urgently, her voice shaking. "We have to take control of it. Now." Marcus gritted his teeth, then pressed his hand firmly onto the artifact's surface. The moment he did, a surge of power shot through him, far stronger than anything he had ever experienced. It was like being struck by lightning, a torrent of energy flooding his mind, blurring his vision. He could hear the Adeptor growling, a sound that was now mixed with something else, a whisper, faint and distant, as if the creature itself was trying to communicate with him. Images flashed in Marcus's mind, visions of a time long past, of a world far older than his own. He saw a civilization, advanced beyond measure, one that had built the artifact not as a weapon, but as a containment field, a way to keep the Adeptor locked away, its power too dangerous to be unleashed. The Adeptor had once ruled this planet, but it had been bound, imprisoned by those who had feared its wrath. The visions continued, showing him the depths of the Adeptor's power, the destruction it could wreak. But there was something else, something buried within the artifact, a key, hidden within the patterns of its energy, something that could either lock the creature away again or destroy it once and for all. "Marcus, what are you seeing?" Ilara's voice cut through the storm of images in his mind. "I'm seeing the truth," he said, his voice strained. "The Adeptor was never meant to be set free. It's the source of untold destruction. But there's a way to stop it." The Adeptor let out another growl, this one more desperate, more violent. "You cannot stop me. You cannot control what you do not understand." Marcus's hand trembled against the artifact, but he forced himself to focus. The vision was clear now. There was a code, a sequence buried within the energy itself. It was the key to resetting the artifact, to resealing the adapter, and sending it back into the prison it had once been bound to. He began to speak aloud, the words coming from his lips as if they were not entirely his own, the ancient language of the artifact flowing through him. The adapter recoiled, its eyes flashing with panic. "No, you cannot." But it was too late. As Marcus completed the sequence, the artifact's light exploded outward, engulfing the entire chamber in a blinding flash. The energy surged with such force that it knocked them all to the ground, the sound of cracking stone filling the air. The adapter screamed, its massive form twisting and thrashing as the power of the artifact began to pull it back into the chasm. The ground shook violently, and the chamber began to collapse as the artifact's energy tore through the walls. The adapter howled in rage as it was drawn back, its form dissolving into the swirling light. For a moment, the world seemed to bend and warp, as if reality itself was being rewritten. Then, with one final, deafening roar, the adapter was gone. The chamber fell silent, the air still heavy with the residual energy of the artifact. The walls cracked and groaned, but the creature was no longer there. Marcus slowly pulled his hand away from the artifact, his body shaking from the sheer force of the power he had just channeled. "We did it," Ilara whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Marcus nodded, though his mind was still reeling. They had stopped the adapter, but at what cost? The artifact was still glowing, its power far from fully spent. They had won, but their victory felt hollow. They had survived, but the galaxy would never be the same again.